Well, I'll tell you a story before we get started. There are 10 companies here today, and the finalists were announced yesterday. 9 were announced before UltraCell, and I have to say that was a little bit nerve-wracking. But today I had a good night's sleep and feel like $1 million. All right, UltraCell Insulation makes high-performance building insulation from recycled corrugated cardboard. Now that's a tough act to follow, but we're going to shift from the augmented world to the physical world, and we'll touch on the augmented world as we go forward. But what UltraCell does is manufacture bags of insulation that can be used in any home. At the end of the day, there are tens of millions of bags of cellulose insulation that ship to homes annually each year, representing a $500 million market. UltraCell has a drop-in replacement product which outperforms existing products, which we can make at a lower cost than existing products, and which has defensible competitive advantages we can leverage for decades to come. So that's what I'm going to walk you through over the next few minutes. Let me back up for just a second and talk about insulation in general. Many of you are probably familiar with fiberglass or foam. Some of you are probably familiar with cellulose, but maybe not everybody. Many people use fiberglass in their homes, but it's not a very effective insulator. Other people may use foam, which is a more effective insulator, but is very expensive. And there are concerns with indoor air quality when foam is used as an insulation material. UltraCell insulation and other cellulose insulation is used by homeowners who want to be energy efficient, but do not want to deal with the indoor air quality issues or the cost issues of foam. Just to give you a sense of what this can do for a home here in Buffalo, New York, a typical homeowner in Buffalo might save as much as $500 to $1,000 a year on their heating bill by insulating with cellulose instead of fiberglass. And because cellulose fills all the cavities in a wall, it can actually often insulate better than foam. Now, it's also safer in fires. There's a misconception that because it's cellulose, because it's a paper-derived product, that it would be flammable. But all cellulose uses a powerful fire retardants that limit fire. In fact, a house built with cellulose is much harder to burn down than a house built with fiberglass. And the reason is that fiberglass melts and creates a chimney in every wall. In contrast, cellulose stays in place and actually acts as a fire block. It's listed as a fire block and can stop the spread of that fire. Spray foam, by contrast, is actually flammable and kind of scary, and also emits a black toxic smoke when it burns. That's why, those are some of the reasons that the cellulose insulation market is growing. The overall market for insulation is $8 billion just in the US before you go global. Of that, $500 million in the market today is cellulose insulation. Cellulose is growing at twice the rate of the overall market because it's a better insulator than foam, better insulator than fiberglass, and it's much more cost-effective and safer in terms of indoor air quality than foam. Also, tightening building codes and concerns with energy efficiency and indoor air quality are driving its growth. But there is a problem. Our competitors make their product out of recycled newspapers, and as I look around the audience today, I don't see one newspaper. That's the problem. Now imagine a world where every home in the United States insulated with cellulose. Just for a second before I show another slide, just imagine that. Cellulose could save the average homeowner thousands of dollars. Oops, I went back a slide. Cellulose could save the average homeowner thousands of dollars and literally could add billions of dollars to our economy just by not wasting it on heat going out the window. I'll talk more about that as we go forward. But the problem is that newsprint supplies are dwindling, newsprint pricing is rising, and the quality of newsprint is decreasing because more and more plastic is mixed with less and less paper in our nation's recycling streams. This is a problem for installers. An installer wants to be in the attic of a building installing insulation, not down in the driveway, tearing apart a hose that's been clogged up by plastic or string or other contaminants, which he's doing multiple times per shift today with a conventional product. Our competitors use a dry process to make their product. They shred newspaper, they add a dry powder fire retardant, and they pack it out in bags. It's very hard to separate plastics at the volumes of material moved in this industry, which are tens of thousands of tons, in that kind of a process. We have a patent and the only proven process for manufacturing a product out of corrugated cardboard which meets all the requirements. And we use a patented liquid process which enables us to finely separate the fibers, which allows us to use corrugated, and it's the only chemistry that's proven to work and proven compatible with water. That's the innovation we bring to market. Just to reiterate, our competitors have tried to use corrugated in their dry process, and they can use a little bit, but not very much, before the product starts to degrade, be too dense, and not insulate well. Ours is the only process that's been proven to meet all of the industry's stringent requirements, including quality, regulatory, and cost. not only do we meet these requirements, we actually exceed them. So UltraCell Insulation is better for installers with our process because it's cleaner and more uniform, won't clog their equipment, and has less dust. It's better for homeowners because we're now actually demonstrating a higher insulation value than conventional cellulose by 5 or 10%. And it's safer for everybody involved. It's actually the safest form of insulation available on the planet. We have lower costs than the competitors who are making cellulose insulation today, and we have a defensible position in two ways. One, we have intellectual property that protects the key technology and other patents pending. We have an issued patent and other patents pending. We also are uniquely able to use corrugated, and there is an abundance of corrugated. For anybody who's got a box from Amazon lately, you know there's a lot of corrugated around. There's actually 10 times as much as there is newsprint, and that supply is growing every year as more and more boxes ship from Amazon. Now, we're not just saying we're going to make a product like this that's better than what's out there. We're saying we have made a product like this that's better than what's out there, and we did it in Niagara Falls, New York. So we've partnered with the nation's largest recycler of corrugated cardboard, which is more than a $400 million facility just up the road in Niagara Falls that recycles 500,000 tons of corrugated cardboard annually. And on the screen here, there's a man in that blue circle up there, just to give you a sense of scale. This is the facility where we ran our production pilot. And we ran the start of the process just off screen, where we made literally tons of product which met all of the industry requirements, as certified by a third-party lab. Okay? Our process actually complements what they're doing that mill, reduces their costs, and that savings enabled us to sign a 10-year contract with the Greenpack Mills to provide us enough material to support $250 million in production over the next 10 years. And we've got a locked-in exclusive supply there, right here in Buffalo. Now, we don't have to invent a market here. That's one of the beautiful things about this business. We have cost advantage, we have a quality advantage, and we don't have to create a market. We are a drop-in replacement. The only difference when you drop a bag of our product into our machine instead of a bag of somebody else's is you don't have to clean out the machine afterwards. There's no contamination, there's no debris. We, as a team, bring deep experience in the industry and personal ties with some of the biggest customers in the industry going back more than a decade, particularly in the Northeast. We don't have to invent any of this distribution. We go through insulation distributors, lumber yards, building supply companies, and installation installers. We put this material into the field, and we know people want it because they've told us. But not only because they've told us, because they've placed millions of dollars in pre-orders. So we have millions of dollars of pre-orders against the facility we want to put in Buffalo with your help. The pricing on this facility supports excellent margins. The financials that we're looking at are $5 million in debt, $5 million in equity, can support a plant that's going to throw off $50 million in cash flow over the next 10 years during that contract period. These numbers have been scrubbed by third-party investors like the Clean Energy Venture Group, Rochester Angels, who've been through the numbers and support it. We've got a team with experience to launch this and to carry it forward. The last two businesses I launched each added more than $10 million within 2 or 3 years of my arrival. Okay, the last one we took to the NASDAQ. Kurt Fisher ran a $500 million supply chain for Teradyne. Bill Hulstruck's been in the industry for more than a decade and knows all of the major customers in the Northeast by name personally, having supported them himself. And Bob Hupper is a deeply experienced process engineer out of the pulp and paper industry who co-invented this technology. We've got a consistent record of creating value. So our investors came in, and every time we've raised money, we've raised it at a higher valuation cap. This has all been convertible notes. It's been raised at caps. And we've done that because every month, every quarter, we're executing supply agreements, fundraising, supply contracts, distribution agreements, and so on, third-party engineering, third-party cost. The first plant we launch will fully prove our cost advantage, and we see this trajectory continuing. We see that once the first plant is running, we will have visibility to $50 million in cash flow and a valuation just on that first plant in the range of $30 to $60 million. Once we roll out multiple plants, which is our intent, we see the potential for hundreds of millions of dollars in value. And let me just describe for a second. Imagine the entire country is using cellulose. 40% of our nation's heat, 40% of our nation's energy in homes is heat. We can save roughly a third of that or a quarter of that. We're talking about reducing our nation's energy use in homes by 10% if we could get everybody to use cellulose. But there is this supply constraint we have to solve first. So the growth is pretty astronomical in terms of where we can go with this. We see the people that would acquire us looking at billions of dollars in sales. This isn't the first time I've launched a business and grown sales rapidly. The last two businesses actually had what they call hockey stick revenue trajectories. This is history. We're forecasting strong growth, but this is what we've demonstrated historically. We know who would buy this business. Down the line, there's plenty of businesses that are in the insulation market that would have a strategic interest in what can be one day a multi-billion-dollar market where we have strategic and defensible advantages. So what we can do for Buffalo, we love the region, we love the workforce, and what we're going to do is not only create 35 direct jobs and hundreds of indirect jobs, but we're going to save New Yorkers money, which is going to be reinvested in the economy. We're looking forward to being here. And these jobs, by the way, will never, ever be offshored.
That was fascinating. I think we'll start with Tom.
What do your competitors think? It sounds to me like they should be afraid if this is cheaper, manufacturable soon. Now you've done it.
Yeah. So let me show you a bag of our product just to give you a sense of what it looks like. And Kurt Fisher, our COO, is going to walk out and join me for the Q&A, and is going to give you samples so you can look for yourself at the difference in fiber structure and uniformity between our product and the competitive product. And to your question on what competitors think of us, they are concerned. We've already been approached by a competitor who wanted to put our technology into their plant. The interesting thing is their plants are set up for a dry process, and there's millions of dollars of investment there. But what Greenpack has up the road is literally hundreds of millions of dollars of capital equipment, which we're leveraging in the launch of this process. So it's actually much more effective to go to market with a partner like Greenpack than it would be to go to market with a conventional cellulose insulation manufacturer. But they certainly have taken notice of us.
Can you actually talk a little bit more about the wet process that you referenced to create the fire retardant?
Sure. Kurt, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. The fundamental difference is that the recycling of cardboard is a wet-based process, and we take a side stream from that. And then we actually have a liquid-based.
Moving you over here so they can see you out.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Hi. So he had a process slide up there that described the fundamental differences. So recycling cardboard inherently is a wet process, and we take a side stream as the raw material that we use for our feedstock. What you need to do to actually introduce and impregnate those fibers with our chemical, our proprietary patented chemistry, is actually also a solution slurry-based material. You bring those together, mix and blend, and then we go through a drying process and then a shredding process to end up with this material. Different than, in contrast to, they're using dry newspapers, they're putting powder on it, they're kind of smashing it together, fiberizing and bagging it. And that just doesn't work with, when they try to introduce cardboard into that paradigm, it just doesn't, you can't get the adhesion and the penetration of flame retardant into it.
And let me just add one comment to that, which is, people have said, why can't somebody use some other chemistry in a liquid process and compete with us? Well, the answer is, this is a very low-cost commodity product, and there's only a few chemistries that have been proven cost-effective to work in cellulose insulation. There are 3 that are commonly used. 2 of them are incompatible with water, and we have a patent on the one that works.
Trace.
Yeah, I was really just going to ask a follow-up to maybe Tom's, and it's about competition. You may have answered some of it, but in terms of the strength of your patent, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, because if you're saying the traditional is newsprint, and coming from someone who knows nothing about building a house, except I live in one, that's it. But if you're saying the traditional newsprint is declining, the folks that play in that space know that. So they're seeing their business erode. They're seeing a new player come up with potentially a transformational product. I would find it hard to believe that someone else isn't trying to jump in on a novel technology to do something similar. So how do you see the competition moving forward as the market changes, and then how defensible is your patent?
Sure. So I'll answer that in 2 parts. So first of all, the competition has taken notice. This is a hard problem to solve. We've actually got 7 years of development in this and $1 million of research into getting to this point. Our competitors have looked at this as shredded newspaper thrown in a bag. We've looked at this as an engineering and material science problem. How do you build an engineering composite that insulates? And we worked with one of the leading laboratories in the fiber processing industry to develop the chemistry. Companies as large as Cascades have attempted to solve this problem. In fact, the company we've partnered with attempted to solve this problem themselves. They're a $1 billion company. They were unable to do it, and that's why they partnered with us to help them. What also solves a residual problem for them, or helps them operate more efficiently. So it's a difficult problem to solve. As we said, we have the only proven solution. I can't predict that it's impossible for somebody to come up with some other fire retardant that might work, but chances are it's exotic, it's expensive, and it's not going to be cost competitive without intruding on our patent. And we can, in terms of defending the patent, the strength of our patent is specific enough that it covers the field of use and the class of chemistry that we use, but it's actually quite broad. You couldn't make a cellulose insulation product that used our process without us being able to detect it and to prosecute infringement cases.
Thanks.
So, question? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, why not? This is affecting every single person that has a home in the country. So is there any part of your strategy that involves digital awareness?
Digital
Awareness.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to get the question from you, Soraya. And I know you've been opposed to fast fashion and the disposal of clothes that are cheaply assembled and the waste associated with it. So one of the things we're doing here is we're actually recovering a stream of material that wasn't previously used, and we're recycling and returning to the environment, which is good. We're also directly sequestering carbon in the atmosphere. But I lost the question. What was the question again?
Digital awareness.
Digital awareness. So we look at this business in 3 phases. So the first phase is launch the first plant, get it into commercial production. The second phase is roll it out nationwide. We don't actually have to displace the incumbents. They're already supply constrained on their materials and the market's growing. We'll take the growth in the market on a nationwide basis, which, by the way, in a $500 million market that's growing 10 or 11% a year, $50 million of business a year, we can take just on market growth. Now, once we've done that, we will have the revenues that will support a marketing campaign. And we can change 2 things. One is consumer awareness, and the second is policy as it relates to building codes. So from a consumer awareness standpoint, many of you in the audience aren't familiar with this product and how much better it is. But this is where augmented reality comes in, because it turns out that thermal imaging cameras are now being used in homes so that inspectors can look at a home and actually see the heat leakage in the homes. And that's one of the major drivers of the growth of this industry, which is that people can see the heat leaking in their homes, and that's why cellulose is growing. So we will launch a major marketing campaign. We're not going to do it today initially because it's not the right stage of development of the company. But I will add, in a prior life, one of the companies I founded previously was woodpellets.com. We built an industry coalition. We got supporters. We lobbied Washington. We spent a total of about $250,000 raised from all the participants in the industry, and we actually were able to successfully have enacted about $100 million in tax subsidy support for that industry, which was missing out on the support for solar and everything else. So we just got parity with that industry when we got to that. So from a policies perspective, there's a tremendous amount of wasted energy in our country, which is literally going out the walls of homes. We can solve that. We just need to make public policy people aware of that.
Matt?
A risk-related question. So what happens if the cardboard industry decides that there's a better product out there, it's petroleum-based or something, and it changes the raw materials that your process is dependent upon? How likely do you think that is to happen? And if it will happen, what are your strategies to defend against a turn in that business?
Okay, I'll make a couple comments and maybe you could add. The first thing is corrugated cardboard is one of the largest recycled materials in the country. 25 million pounds a year, which is an enormous volume. Not all of it is usable in the process of making new corrugated cardboard, which is the primary use of it. And there are side streams we can use that nobody else can use. And the industry has been for decades searching for applications, and they've actually tried this application, they've failed. We're the only ones that can use it today. And the alternative use today, when we've approached plants, they're either landfilling some of this material, literally tens of thousands of tons of landfill per facility, or literally millions across the industry, of more than 1 million tons of landfill materials across the industry. We're solving that problem. The other use they use it for is animal bedding, which is a much lower value process. Now, if there were some other way to use it, I can't predict that will never happen, but I can tell you we're orders of magnitude higher value, which allows us to outbid today.
On the kind of risk of the future standpoint of what could happen in the markets for packaging. So having dealt with kind of consumer goods, electronics, life sciences, materials, when you move to kind of more exotic materials, the cost goes up tremendously, and then you kind of get into these kind of reuse package kind of things, and they get very expensive. So it's usually you have to have a very high value add product to kind of support that kind of packaging. It does exist today, preserved goods, things like that. But when you're dealing with something that is more on the commodity end, it really, and the things that people buy in their houses, the cardboard market looks pretty good for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
So on panelized manufacturing, panelized housing, are you doing any outreach to that group for your benefits?
Great, I'm glad you asked the question. So one of the trends in the building industry is towards prefabricated homes and modular manufacturing. And modular manufacturers love cellulose, and they lean towards it because it's a very effective insulator and because they can operate in their plants. They can't put foam into their plants because of the indoor air quality issues associated with foam. So we were already in discussions with multiple modular home manufacturers.
Last question, Eric.
I wouldn't expect you to offer this up, but what are some of the limiting factors? Everything you've talked about today sounds absolutely perfect. There should be no reason why you're even here to get funding. because you're doing so well, everything's rosy. So, but I'm just curious, what are some of the limiting factors? What keeps you up at night? What are you concerned about?
So the challenge we get as we stand in front of equity investors, lenders are actually harder than equity guys, is, okay, so you have to go build a plant, right? So what are the risks in that? And having kind of 30 years on and off of doing different kind of ramp-ups, plant constructions, production line installations, and bringing product to market, it's always about taking technology off the critical path. And so we've done that in a couple ways. So the first way is the patents, right? So offline from all this work, our inventor Bob Hubbard's here today. He's worked 6-7 years in conjunction with the University of Maine to figure this out. And the University of Maine is basically the MIT of fibers, right? Of forest kind of based products. And then so a very solid engineering and execution plan. But it's all lined out, good planning and execution.
Great job. Thanks, guys. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Well done.